I'm Marcus Thompson, 34, a single father who's been raising my 8-year-old son Jake alone for 3 years. After my divorce, my family made it clear that boys need their mother and that I was failing him by not fighting harder to keep the marriage together. Every family gathering became a lecture about how I was damaging Jake's future, how he needed a woman's touch, how I couldn't possibly understand what a growing boy required. For 3 years, I listened to their criticism while working 2 jobs, learning to braid hair from YouTube videos, and staying up late helping with homework. I doubted myself constantly, wondering if they were right, if I was somehow inadequate as Jake's only parent. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Jake's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, asked me to come in for a conference. My heart sank, expecting another discussion about behavioral problems or academic struggles. Instead, she looked me in the eye and said words that would shatter my family's narrative forever. Mr. Thompson, I need to tell you something important about your son and what kind of father you really are. I remember the exact moment my world shifted, not when Sarah told me she was leaving, but when Jake handed me a crayon drawing afterward. It was our family, 3 stick figures standing in front of a house. But Sarah's figure was crossed out, with angry red scribbles, and above it, in his careful second-grade handwriting, he'd written "Gone." The divorce papers had been finalized 6 months earlier, but the real blow came when Sarah announced she was moving to Portland with her new boyfriend, David. "It's a fresh start," she'd said, as if Jake and I were simply part of her old life, to be discarded. The custody arrangement became a joke, scheduled visits that she'd cancel, phone calls that grew shorter and less frequent. My family's reaction was swift and brutal. "You should have fought harder," Mom said at Sunday dinner. Jake sitting right there absorbing every word. "Boys need stability, Marcus. They need their mothers." My sister Jessica chimed in with her perfect suburban wisdom. "Maybe you should consider letting Jake live with Sarah. It might be better for him in the long run." I watched Jake's face crumple slightly, the way it did when he was trying not to cry. That night, I found him in his room, staring at the ceiling. "Dad," he whispered, "are you going to send me away too?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Never," I told him, pulling him close. "We're a team, buddy, always." But even as I said the words, doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if I couldn't give Jake what he needed? Sarah had always been the organized one, the one who remembered doctor's appointments and knew which vegetables Jake actually liked. She'd handled the emotional conversations, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees and hurt feelings. Now it was just me, fumbling through parenting books at midnight, Googling how to talk to your child about divorce and single father's survival guide. I felt like I was drowning, but I couldn't let Jake see that. He'd already lost one parent to geography, and indifference. I couldn't let him lose another to my own insecurities. The hardest part wasn't the logistics of single parenting, though those were overwhelming enough. It was the constant second-guessing, the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother. "You're not enough. You don't know what you're doing. Boys need their mothers." Jake adapted with the resilience that children possess, but I could see the cracks. He became quieter, more careful with his words. He started doing small things to help me, setting the table without being asked, organizing his backpack, putting himself to bed when I was working late. At 8 years old, he was trying to take care of me because he sensed how overwhelmed I was. That's when I made a decision that would define the next 3 years of our lives. I wasn't going to just survive single parenthood, I was going to master it. I owed Jake that much. I owed myself that much. But first, I had to prove to everyone, including myself, that a father could be enough. My first attempt at braiding Jake's hair was a disaster. He'd asked me to help him look neat for picture day, and I'd confidently said yes, having no idea what I was getting into. 20 minutes later, we both stared at the lopsided mess in the bathroom mirror. Jake's hair looked like it had been attacked by a drunken octopus. "Maybe we should just use gel," he suggested diplomatically, and I realized my 8-year-old was already learning to manage my feelings. That night, after Jake was asleep, I found myself hunched over my laptop watching YouTube tutorials on children's hairstyles. I filled a small notebook with sketches and instructions. Start with damp hair. Divide into 3 sections. Cross left over middle, then right over middle. I practiced on my own hair until I could do a basic braid blindfolded. Notebook became my survival guide. I documented everything: which vegetables Jake would actually eat: carrots, broccoli with cheese, no green beans ever, how to get marker stains out of clothes, rubbing alcohol and prayer, the exact routine that would get him to sleep without a fight story, back rub, leave the hallway light on. Working 2 jobs meant I was always exhausted, but I refused to let it show. My day job at the insurance office paid the bills, but barely. So I picked up evening shifts doing freelance bookkeeping for small businesses, working on my laptop after Jake went to bed. Some nights I'd fall asleep at the kitchen table, spreadsheets still glowing on the screen. Jake noticed everything. One morning, I woke up on the couch with a blanket draped over me and a glass of water on the coffee table. "You looked cold," he said matter-of-factly over his cereal, "and thirsty." He started small acts of helpfulness that broke my heart and made me proud simultaneously. He'd lay out his clothes the night before, pack his own lunch when I was running late. He never complained. When dinner was scrambled eggs again because I'd forgotten to grocery shop. The learning curve was steep and unforgiving. I made mistakes, constantly forgot about the school carnival until the day before. Sent Jake to a birthday party a week early, dressed him in shorts during a surprise cold snap, but slowly, painfully, I started to figure it out. The breakthrough came during a particularly difficult week when Jake came down with the flu. I took time off work, something I couldn't afford but couldn't avoid. For 3 days, I was his nurse, his entertainment, his comfort. I learned to read his fever, to know when he needed medicine and when he just needed me to sit with him. On the third night, when his fever finally broke, Jake looked at me with tired but grateful eyes. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered. "You take really good care of me." That's when I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving single parenthood anymore. I was actually getting good at it. The notebook of YouTube tutorials and desperate Google searches was evolving into genuine knowledge. I could French braid his hair, make homemade chicken soup, and recognize the difference between a real stomachache and a "I don't want to go to school" stomachache. More importantly, Jake was thriving. His quiet resilience wasn't just adaptation, with confidence. He knew I would be there, that I would figure things out, that our little family of 2 was solid and dependable. But outside our home, the criticism continued. Family gatherings still featured helpful suggestions about finding Jake a mother figure and concerns about his development. I started to dread holidays, knowing they would bring fresh rounds of unwanted advice and thinly veiled disapproval. What they didn't see were the moments that mattered. Jake's proud smile when I finally mastered the perfect pancake flip, his excited chatter about his day during our car rides, the way he'd curl up next to me during movie nights and say, "This is the best part of my day, Dad." We were building something together, Jake and I, something that didn't fit their traditional definitions but was undeniably real and strong. I just wished I could see it as clearly as he did. Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house was a minefield of unsolicited advice disguised as concern. Jake and I had barely walked through the door when Mom started her campaign. "Marcus, honey, you look tired," she said, taking my coat while eyeing the dark circles under my eyes. "Are you getting enough help? I know Mrs. Patterson from church is single and wonderful with children." I felt Jake's hand slip into mine, a silent show of solidarity. "We're doing fine, Mom, but are you really?" Jessica chimed in from the kitchen, where she was orchestrating her picture-perfect holiday spread with military precision. "I mean, no offense, but Jake needs stability. He needs routine. He needs his father," I interrupted, more sharply than I intended. The room fell silent. My father looked up from his newspaper, and my brother Tom paused his conversation with his wife. Even the children seemed to sense the tension, their chatter dying to whispers. "Of course he does," Mom said carefully, "the way you'd speak to someone having a breakdown. But boys his age also need maternal guidance. They need someone who understands their emotional needs." I watched Jake's face change, saw him absorb the implication that I couldn't understand his emotional needs. His grip on my hand tightened. "Jake gets plenty of emotional support," I said evenly. "From whom?" Jessica asked, genuinely puzzled. "You work all the time, Marcus. When do you have heart-to-heart conversations? When do you teach him about relationships, about expressing his feelings?" The questions hit their mark because they echoed my own fears. When Jake had nightmares, I held him until he fell back asleep, but I never knew if I was saying the right things. When he cried over a dead bird we found in the yard, I helped him bury it and told him it was okay to be sad. But was that enough? Was I enough? During dinner, the conversation drifted to safer topics, but the damage was done. I caught Jake pushing food around his plate, unusually quiet. When my cousin asked him about school, he gave short, polite answers instead of his usual enthusiastic stories. The family photo session was torture. Jessica directed us into the perfect arrangement, her family in the center, the golden example of domestic bliss, with Jake and me relegated to the edge. "Smile, Marcus," she commanded. "You look like you're at a funeral." In the photo, which would later be framed and displayed prominently on Mom's mantle, I can see everything wrong with that moment. Jake's smile is forced, his small body leaning slightly away from the group. My own expression is strained, defensive. We look like outsiders at our own family gathering. The drive home was quiet until Jake finally spoke up. "Dad, do you wish I had a mom?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. I pulled over, needing to look at him properly. "Jake, I wish you had a mom who wanted to be your mom, but you don't, and that's not your fault or mine. It's just how things are. But Grandma says boys need moms to be happy. Grandma loves you, but she's wrong about that. You know what boys need? They need someone who loves them, who takes care of them, who shows up every day. They need someone who listens when they're scared and celebrates when they're proud. That's what boys need, buddy. Not a mom or a dad specifically, just someone who's Olin." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Are you Olin, Dad?" "Completely. Are you?" "Yeah," he said, and his smile was genuine for the first time all day. "We're a team." But as we continued home, I couldn't shake the family's words. Their criticism followed me everywhere, a constant whisper of doubt. At the grocery store, I'd wonder if other parents judged my cart full of frozen dinners and cereal. At school pickup, I'd noticed the groups of moms chatting easily while I stood alone, checking my phone and trying to look busy. The worst part was that their disapproval was wrapped in love. They genuinely believed they were helping, that their concerns came from a place of caring. But their caring felt like judgment, and their help felt like criticism of everything I was trying so hard to do right. That night, as I tucked Jake into bed, he looked up at me with serious eyes. "Dad, I don't think Grandma knows what she's talking about." "What do you mean?" "I think she forgot what it's like to be a kid. Kids don't need perfect families. They just need someone who makes them feel safe and happy, and you do that." Out of the mouths of babes, my 8-year-old son had figured out something that had taken me years to understand. Love isn't about fitting into someone else's definition of family. It's about showing up every day and making the person you love feel valued and secure. Only I could hold on to that certainty when the doubts crept in during the long, exhausting nights ahead. The stack of parenting books on my nightstand grew taller each week. The Emotional Life of Boys, Single Parenting Success, Raising Confident Children, I devoured them all, searching for validation that I wasn't ruining Jake's life through my ignorance. 3 a.m. became my regular research hour. After finishing the freelance bookkeeping that paid our bills, I'd spiral into internet rabbit holes about child development milestones. Was Jake too quiet? Too helpful? Should an 8-year-old be so independent? Every article seemed to contradict the last, and every expert had a different opinion about what children needed. The doubt crept into everything. When Jake asked for help with math homework, I'd second-guess my explanation. When he had trouble sleeping, I'd wonder if I was handling his anxiety correctly. When he seemed sad, I'd panic that I wasn't giving him enough emotional support. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in February. Jake had been unusually withdrawn all week, barely touching his dinner and giving one-word answers to my questions. That night, I found him sitting on his bedroom floor, staring at a photo of Sarah from before the divorce. "I miss her," he said quietly, not looking up. My heart clenched. This was exactly what my family had warned me about, the moment when my love wouldn't be enough, when Jake would realize what he was missing by not having his mother around. "I know you do, buddy," I managed to say. "Do you think she misses me?" The question gutted me. Sarah called maybe once a month now. Conversations that lasted 10 minutes if we were lucky. Her last visit had been canceled because of David's work schedule, and she'd sent a gift card for Jake's birthday instead of calling. "I think she misses you in her own way," I said carefully, hating myself for the diplomatic non-answer. Jake nodded and set the photo aside. "Dad, are you sad that I miss her?" "No, Jake. She's your mom. It's normal to miss her, but does it make you feel bad? Like you're not enough?" The perceptiveness of his question took my breath away. I sat down on the floor next to him, struggling to find the right words. "Sometimes I worry that I'm not enough," I admitted, "but that's my worry, not your fault." "You are enough," he said simply. "I miss Mom, but I don't want to live with her. I want to live with you." That night, after Jake was asleep, I called Sarah. It was nearly 11 p.m. on the West Coast, but I needed to have a conversation that was 3 years overdue. "Marcus, is everything okay? Is Jake hurt?" "He's fine, but he's asking about you, and I need to know what you want me to tell him." There was a long pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean he's 8 years old, and he's trying to understand why his mom moved across the country and barely calls. He's trying to understand if that's his fault." "Of course it's not his fault," Sarah said defensively. "I'm building a new life here. David and I are getting married next year, and we're talking about having kids of our own." "Stop," I interrupted. "Just stop. You have a kid. His name is Jake, and he's amazing, and he deserves better than being treated like a reminder of your past. That's not fair, Marcus. I didn't want the divorce, but you wanted to leave. You wanted to start over somewhere else with someone else, and you left us both behind. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you to either be Jake's mother or let him move on." The silence stretched between us, filled with years of unresolved anger and hurt. "I can't be the mother he needs right now," she finally said, her voice small. "David doesn't really want to be a stepfather, and I'm trying to make this work." "Then stop calling sporadically and getting his hopes up. Stop making promises you won't keep. Let him adjust to the reality that you're not coming back." After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, surrounded by my parenting books and study guides, feeling more lost than ever. Was I protecting Jake or hurting him by setting boundaries with Sarah? Was I enough, or was I just stubbornly insisting I could be? The next morning, Jake seemed lighter somehow, as if our conversation had lifted a weight he'd been carrying. He chattered about school over breakfast and asked if we could build a fort in the living room that weekend. "Dad," he said as I dropped him off at school, "I'm glad I live with you." "I'm glad too, buddy." But as I drove to work, the familiar questions returned. Every parenting decision felt monumental, every mistake potentially damaging. The weight of being solely responsible for another human being's emotional well-being was crushing some days. I didn't know then that Jake was watching me navigate these challenges with admiration rather than concern. I didn't know that my midnight research sessions and careful consideration of his needs were exactly what a good parent should do. I didn't know that my love and dedication were already more than enough. All I knew was that I had to keep trying, keep learning, keep showing up. Jake deserved nothing less than my best effort, even when I wasn't sure what that looked like. Jake's announcement that he wanted to join the school soccer team came out of nowhere. We were eating dinner spaghetti with marinara sauce from a jar, because I still hadn't mastered homemade one. He suddenly looked up and said, "Dad, can I play soccer?" Soccer, I repeated, buying time. My sports knowledge was limited to watching the occasional football game with my father. I knew soccer involved running and kicking a ball, but that was about it. Tommy's dad coaches the team, and he said they need more players. Tommy says it's really fun. The hesitation in Jake's voice told me this wasn't just a casual interest. He wanted this, but he was prepared for disappointment. How many times had Sarah promised to sign him up for activities, only to forget or decide it was too complicated? Of course you can play soccer, I said, and his face lit up like Christmas morning. What followed was a crash course in youth athletics that made learning to braid hair seem simple. Equipment lists, practice schedules, tournament calendars, snack rotations. It was like joining a small army with very specific uniform requirements. I spent an entire Saturday at the sporting goods store with Jake, both of us overwhelmed by the wall of soccer cleats and shin guards. The teenage sales associate took pity on us, explaining the difference between turf shoes and cleats, helping us find the right size everything. "First time?" she asked kindly as I struggled to understand why a child needed 3 different types of socks. "Is it that obvious? You'll get the hang of it. Most parents do." The first practice was humbling. I stood on the sidelines with the other parents, many of whom had clearly been through this before. They knew the coach's name, understood the drills, spoke casually about previous seasons and upcoming tournaments. Jake was tentative at first, hanging back while the more experienced players ran through, but within minutes, his natural athleticism and competitive spirit emerged. He might not have known all the rules, but he could run fast and wasn't afraid of the ball. "Your son's got good instincts," Coach Martinez told me after practice. "How long has he been playing?" "About an hour," I admitted, and the coach laughed. "Well, he's a natural. We practice Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5, games on Saturdays. Can you make that work?" I could make it work. I'd have to rearrange my freelance schedule and leave work early twice a week, but I could make it work. What I didn't expect was how much I'd love it. Watching Jake discover something he was genuinely good at, seeing his confidence grow with each practice, witnessing him make friends with kids who shared his enthusiasm, was magic. I became the dad who arrived early to help set up cones and stayed late to help pack equipment. I learned the rules through observation and YouTube videos, the same way I'd learned everything else about parenting. Soon I was shouting encouragement from the sidelines with the best of them. The breakthrough moment came during Jake's 3rd game. He'd been playing well but hadn't scored yet, something that was clearly frustrating him. In the second half, he intercepted a pass near midfield and took off toward the goal. I watched him navigate around 2 defenders, his face set with determination. When the ball hit the back of the net, the explosion of joy on his face was matched only by my own ridiculous celebration. I jumped up and down like an idiot, probably embarrassing him, but I didn't care. He'd done it. He'd scored his first goal. After the game, as we loaded his gear into the car, Jake was practically vibrating with excitement. "Did you see that? Dad, did you see the goal?" "I saw it, buddy. I'm so proud of you. I can't wait to tell Mom," he said, then caught himself. "I mean, if she calls. You should tell her anyway. Send her a text or email. This is a big deal." The trophy presentation at the end of the season was simple plastic figures on marble bases, the kind of participation award that some parents complain about, but when Jake received his, he held it like it was made of gold. "Thanks for letting me play," he said in the car afterward. "Thanks for wanting to. You made me proud out there, Jake. Not just because you scored goals or played well, but because you worked hard and never gave up. Can I play again next season?" "Absolutely." That night, Jake placed his trophy on his dresser where he could see it from his bed. As I tucked him in, he looked at it with satisfaction. "Dad, do you think Grandma would say soccer is something boys need their moms for?" I laughed. "Nobody. I think even Grandma would admit this is something we figured out pretty well on our own. We make a good team, the best team." What started as Jake's interest in soccer became our shared passion. I learned that sometimes the best parenting happens not in the quiet moments of emotional support, but in the loud, muddy, chaotic joy of watching your child discover their strengths. Soccer gave us both confidence, Jake in his abilities, and me in my capacity to support his dreams, whatever they might be. The season taught me that good parenting isn't about having all the answers from the start. It's about being willing to learn alongside your child, to embrace new challenges together, and to celebrate the victories, big and small, along the way. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing insurance claims at work. Mrs. Rodriguez's name appeared on my phone screen, and my stomach immediately dropped. Teachers only called during work hours when something was wrong. "Mr. Thompson, this is Elena Rodriguez, Jake's teacher. Do you have a moment to talk?" I stepped away from my desk, already mentally preparing for bad news. Is Jake okay? Did something happen? Jake is fine, she said quickly, but I'd like to schedule a conference with you if possible. Are you available tomorrow after school? Of course. What's this about? There was a pause, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Would 4 o'clock work for you? The professional distance in her tone made me more nervous. In the 3 years since Jake started at Riverside Elementary, I'd had exactly 2 parent-teacher conferences, both routine check-ins where Mrs. Rodriguez had praised Jake's behavior and academic progress. This felt different. I'll be there, I said. That evening, I tried to act normal around Jake, but he picked up on my anxiety immediately. Is everything okay, Dad? You seem worried. Mrs. Rodriguez wants to meet with me tomorrow. Did anything happen? At school today, Jake's brow furrowed in concentration. I don't think so. We had a spelling test, and I think I did okay. Oh, and Marcus Chen threw up during lunch, but that wasn't my fault. Any problems with other kids? Anyone bothering you? No. Everyone's pretty nice. Tommy and I are working on a project about dinosaurs for science class. He seemed genuinely puzzled, which only increased my concern. If Jake didn't know why his teacher wanted to see me, it had to be serious. I barely slept that night, running through worst-case scenarios. Had Jake been acting out in ways I didn't know about? Was he struggling academically? Had my family's criticisms been right? Was I missing something important about his development? The next day dragged endlessly. I left work early and sat in the school parking lot for 10 minutes, trying to calm my nerves. Riverside Elementary was Jake's second school. We'd moved after the divorce to a smaller apartment in a better district, and I'd always felt like an outsider among the other parents. Most of them had been there since kindergarten, part of an established community that included birthday party networks and carpool arrangements. Mrs. Rodriguez's classroom was decorated with colorful posters about reading and mathematics, student artwork covering every available wall space. She was organizing papers at her desk when I arrived, her expression serious but not unkind. Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. I settled into the small plastic chair across from her desk, feeling like I was the one in trouble. Mrs. Rodriguez was probably in her 40s. With graying hair and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades working with children, Jake spoke of her with genuine affection, which had always reassured me about his school experience. I wanted to talk to you about Jake, she began, opening a folder thick with papers. But first, I have a question. How do you think he's doing this year? The question caught me off guard. I think he's doing well. His grades are good. He seems happy. He talks about school positively. Is there something I should be concerned about? Mrs. Rodriguez smiled slightly. Actually, that's exactly what I wanted to discuss. Jake is doing more than well, Mr. Thompson. He's exceptional. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. Exceptional how? Academically, he's performing above grade level in all subjects. But that's not why I asked you here. She pulled out several sheets of paper covered in Jake's handwriting. We had an assignment last week where students wrote about their heroes. I'd like you to read Jake's essay. She handed me the papers, and I saw the title written in Jake's careful script. My hero? My dad. My hands trembled slightly as I read his words. He wrote about how I learned to braid his hair by watching videos, how I came to every soccer practice even when I was tired from work, how I made him feel safe and loved even when he was scared about the divorce. He described specific moments. I'd forgotten the time I stayed up all night when he had food poisoning, the way I celebrated when he learned to ride his bike, how I always listened when he had problems at school, but it was the ending that broke me. My dad works really hard to take care of me, and sometimes I think he's tired or worried, but he never makes me feel like I'm too much trouble. Some kids at school say they wish their dads paid as much attention to them as my dad pays to me. I'm lucky because my dad is my best friend and my hero at the same time. I looked up to find Mrs. Rodriguez watching me with gentle eyes. He wrote that without any prompting, I've been teaching for 18 years, Mr. Thompson, and I've never read anything quite like it. I had no idea he felt this way, I said, my voice thick with emotion. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Jake is remarkable, but not just because he's smart or well-behaved. He's empathetic, mature, and confident in ways that are unusual for his age. He looks out for other children, he's kind to everyone, and he has this quiet strength that impresses all of his teachers. She pulled out more papers, examples of Jake's work, notes from other teachers, observations about his interactions with classmates. Mr. Thompson, I've worked with hundreds of families over the years, and I can tell you that children like Jake don't happen by accident. The way he carries himself, the way he treats others, his emotional intelligence, these are direct reflections of the parenting he's receiving at home. I stared at her, hardly able to process what she was saying. I asked you here because I wanted you to know that whatever you're doing, it's working. Jake is thriving, and it's clear that he feels deeply loved and supported. In my professional opinion, you're doing an outstanding job as his father. The words hit me like a physical force. For 3 years, I'd been drowning in doubt and criticism, convinced that I was failing Jake in ways I couldn't even see. And here was his teacher, someone who saw him every day, telling me the opposite. There's one more thing, Mrs. Rodriguez said softly. I don't know if you realize this, but Jake talks about you constantly. He's proud of you, Mr. Thompson. He brags about you to his friends. In all my years of teaching, I've rarely seen a child who feels so secure in their parents. Love, I couldn't speak. The relief, the validation, the sheer overwhelming joy of hearing that Jake was not just okay but truly happy, it was almost too much to process. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice warm with conviction, you're not just a good father, you're Father of the Year. I sat in that tiny plastic chair, holding Jake's essay, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. Mrs. Rodriguez's words, Father of the Year, echoed in my head, but I couldn't quite believe them. I don't understand, I said finally. For 3 years, everyone has been telling me that Jake needs more than I can give him, that boys need their mothers, that I'm not enough. With all due respect to everyone, Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted gently, they're wrong. And Jake's development is proof of that. She opened another folder, this one thick with documentation I'd never seen before. I've been taking notes about Jake since the beginning of the school year because his growth has been so remarkable. Would you like to hear some specific examples? I nodded, still clutching his essay. Last month, there was an incident where a new student, Maria, was crying at lunch because some children were teasing her about her accent. Jake didn't just tell a teacher, he sat with Maria, shared his lunch with her, and spent the rest of the week making sure she had someone to play with at recess. When I asked him why, he said, Dad always tells me that being kind doesn't cost anything, but it can mean everything to someone who's having a hard day. The words were mine. Something I'd said after Jake witnessed a homeless man being ignored. On the street, I'd had no idea he'd internalized it so deeply. There's more, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. During our unit on family structures, Jake gave a presentation about single-parent families. He spoke with such confidence and pride about your relationship that it started a wonderful discussion about different types of families. Several children mentioned afterward that Jake made them feel better about their own family situations. She showed me Jake's presentation notes, written in his careful handwriting. He'd included statistics about single-parent households, drawn pictures of different family configurations, and ended with a slide that said, families are about love, not numbers. Where did he get these statistics? I asked, amazed. He told me you helped him research them. He was very proud that you took the time to help him find real facts instead of just opinions. I remembered that evening. Jake had been worried about the presentation, anxious about being different from his classmates. We'd spent 2 hours on the computer together, looking up information and practicing his speech. I'd thought I was just helping with homework, but apparently I'd been teaching him to defend his reality with knowledge and confidence. Mr. Thompson, I need you to understand something, Mrs. Rodriguez said, leaning forward. I see children every day who come from traditional two-parent homes where they're emotionally neglected, ignored, or treated as inconveniences. I see children with every material advantage who lack confidence, kindness, or resilience. And then, I see Jake. She pulled out another paper, Jake's most recent academic assessment. He's reading at a 5th grade level. His math skills are advanced for his age. But those aren't the things that impress me most. It's his emotional intelligence, his problem-solving abilities, his natural leadership qualities. Do you know that? Other children come to him when they're upset. They trust him to listen and give good advice. That's extraordinary for an 8. I thought about the conversations Jake and I had really had, not just the surface-level daily check-ins. When he was worried about something, we talked through it together. When he was excited about something, I listened with genuine interest. When he made mistakes, we discussed what happened and how to handle it differently next time. But surely other parents do that too, I said. You'd be surprised how many don't. How many parents are too busy, too distracted, or too convinced that children should be seen and not heard. Jake clearly feels heard, valued, and respected in your home. That's not as common as you might think. Mrs. Rodriguez reached for one more document. This is the part I really wanted to share with you. We had the children write about their biggest dreams and goals. Most 8-year-olds write about wanting to be astronauts or professional athletes. Would you like to know what Jake wrote? She handed me a sheet of construction paper with Jake's response. My biggest dream is to be a good dad like my dad when I grow up. I want to take care of my kids the way he takes care of me, and make them feel as safe and happy as I feel. The tears came without warning. I'd spent 3 years wondering if I was damaging Jake, if my love was enough, if he was missing something crucial by not having his mother around. And here was proof that not only was he okay, he wanted to be like me. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Rodriguez said softly, I've had this conversation with parents before, usually to address problems or concerns. This is the first time I've asked a parent to come in just to tell them they're doing an exceptional job. Jake is thriving because of you, not in spite of your circumstances. But my family, everyone keeps saying he needs his mother. Jake has told me about those comments. Do you know what he says when other adults suggest he's missing something? He says, I have everything I need at home with my dad. That's not bravado or denial. Mr. Thompson, that's genuine contentment. I looked at Jake's essay again, really reading it this time. The specific examples he'd chosen, the way he wrote. about feeling safe and loved. The pride in his voice when he described our life together, it painted a picture of a childhood I'd been too anxious and exhausted to see clearly. "I want you to take this home," Mrs. Rodriguez said, handing me copies of everything she'd shown me. "I want you to read through it when you have time to really absorb it, and I want you to remember this conversation the next time someone suggests you're not giving Jake what he needs." As I gathered the papers, she added, "There's one more thing. Jake has been selected for the Accelerated Learning Program next year. It's an honor that reflects both his academic abilities and his emotional maturity." The selection committee was particularly impressed by his essay about leadership, where he wrote about learning from your example. I walked to my car in a daze, clutching the folder of Jake's work and Mrs. Rodriguez's observations. For 3 years, I'd been operating from a place of fear that I wasn't enough, that Jake was suffering because of my limitations, that I was somehow failing him by not being able to provide a traditional family structure. But Jake's own words told a different story. They told the story of a child who felt deeply loved, completely secure, and genuinely proud of his father. They told the story of a little boy who wasn't missing anything at all in the car. I called my supervisor and told him I needed to leave early for a family emergency. It wasn't a lie discovering that everything I'd been worried about was wrong, felt like the kind of emergency that required immediate attention. I drove to Jake's school and waited in the pickup line, watching other parents check their phones or chat with each other. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like exactly what I was. A father who had worked incredibly hard to give his son a good life, and who had succeeded beyond his own recognition. When Jake climbed into the back seat, chattering about his day, I saw him differently, not as a child who might be lacking something, but as a confident, happy, well-adjusted boy who knew he was loved. "How was your meeting with Mrs. Rodriguez?" he asked as we pulled out of the parking lot. "It was good, buddy, really good. She showed me some of your work. Did I get in trouble for something?" "No, Jake. Actually, she wanted to tell me how proud she is of you, how proud I should be of you." In the rearview mirror, I saw him smile. "I like Mrs. Rodriguez. She's really nice, and she listens when we have things to say. She told me you wrote an essay about me." Jake's cheeks turned pink. Was that okay? I wasn't sure if I was supposed to write about family. It was more than okay. It was the best thing anyone's ever written about me. That evening, after Jake was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table reading through everything Mrs. Rodriguez had given me: academic assessments, behavioral observations, examples of Jake's kindness and leadership. It was a comprehensive picture of a child who was not just surviving but thriving. The phone rang around 9 o'clock. It was my mother. "Marcus, how did the parent conference go?" "I've been worried all day." "It went well, Mom, really well." "What did the teacher want to discuss?" "Is Jake having problems?" I looked at Jake's essay, still open on the table in front of me. "Ashley, she wanted to tell me that Jake is exceptional, that he's academically advanced, emotionally mature, and one of the kindest children she's ever taught." There was a pause. "Well, that's wonderful, honey, but is he happy? Does he seem to be missing?" "Mom," I interrupted gently, "Jake is happy. He's more than happy. He's thriving. And according to his teacher, it's because of the home we've built together, not in spite of it." "Of course, dear. I never doubted that you love him." Mrs. Rodriguez called me Father of the Year. Mom, she said that in 18 years of teaching, she's rarely seen a child who feels as secure and loved as Jake does. The silence stretched between us, and I could almost hear her reassessing 3 years of criticism and concern. "Marcus," she said finally, "I owe you an apology." The academic progress report that Mrs. Rodriguez had given me became my new Bible. I studied it like a legal document, absorbing every detail about Jake's development over the past year. Reading level, advanced mathematical reasoning, exceptional. Social skills, exemplary. Work habits, outstanding. But it was the narrative comments that really opened my eyes. Jake demonstrates unusual empathy for his age group and often serves as a mediator when conflicts arise among classmates. His problem-solving approach is methodical and creative, suggesting strong critical thinking skills. Jake exhibits natural leadership qualities and is well respected by his peers. These weren't the characteristics of a child who was struggling or lacking something essential. These were the qualities of a confident, secure, well-adjusted kid who had been given a solid foundation at home. I thought back to all the moments I'd second-guessed myself, when Jake had nightmares and I'd held him until he fell back asleep, worrying that I wasn't providing the right kind of comfort, when he'd asked me about emotions and relationships, and I'd tried my best to give thoughtful, honest answers, convinced that I was failing him by not having a woman's perspective. But, according to Mrs. Rodriguez's observations, those moments had been exactly what Jake needed. The nights I'd spent researching child development, the careful attention I'd paid to his emotional needs, the way I'd included him in age-appropriate decision-making, all of it had contributed to raising a remarkable child. The report included specific examples that made me realize how much I'd been missing. During a classroom discussion about different types of families, Jake had spoken with such confidence about single-parent households that several other children had approached Mrs. Rodriguez afterward to ask questions about their own family situations. He'd become a source of reassurance for classmates who lived with grandparents, or whose parents were divorced, or who had other non-traditional family structures. Your son has an unusual gift for making others feel normal and accepted, Mrs. Rodriguez had written. This suggests that he feels normal and accepted himself, which is a direct reflection of the security he feels at home. There was more. Jake had been selected to be a peer mediator, helping younger children resolve playground conflicts. He'd volunteered to tutor a classmate who was struggling with reading. When a new student had joined the class mid-year, Jake had been the first to invite him to play at recess. These weren't random acts of kindness. They were patterns of behavior that revealed Jake's character. And character, I was learning, doesn't develop in a vacuum. It's shaped by the values and examples children see at home every day. I remembered a conversation we'd had a few months earlier about a homeless man we'd seen downtown. Jake had asked why some people didn't have homes, and we'd talked about mental illness, job loss, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. I'd given him $1 to put in the man's cup, explaining that small acts of kindness mattered. At the time, I'd worried that I was exposing Jake to harsh realities too early, that I should have found a way to shield him from uncomfortable truths. But Mrs. Rodriguez's report mentioned that Jake had been the only child in his class to speak up when a substitute teacher made dismissive comments about homeless people. He'd politely but firmly explained that homeless people were still people, who deserved respect. The phone call with my mother the night before had been a revelation in itself. Her admission that she owed me an apology had caught me completely off guard. For 3 years, I'd internalized her criticism, believing that her concerns came from wisdom and experience I lacked. But sitting with Jake's progress report and essay, I realized that my mother's perspective had been limited by her own assumptions about family structure. She'd been so focused on what Jake didn't have, a mother in the home, that she'd failed to see what he did have, a father who was completely devoted to his well-being. The truth was more complex than I'd understood. Good parenting wasn't about checking boxes or fitting into traditional roles. It was about being present, being consistent, and being genuinely invested in your child's happiness and development. It was about listening more than talking, supporting more than directing, and creating an environment where a child could grow into their best self. Jake had been trying to tell me this all along. Every time he'd said, "We make a good team," or "I'm glad I live with you," or "You're the best dad," he'd been giving me evidence that I'd been too anxious and self-doubting to fully believe. Mrs. Rodriguez had also shared something that stopped me cold. Jake's response when she'd asked the class what they would change about their lives if they could change anything. While other children had wished for more toys, different siblings, or bigger houses, Jake had written, "I wouldn't change anything. I like my life exactly how it is." That night, I found Jake in his room working on homework, his soccer trophy prominent on his dresser, alongside the latest edition, a certificate for making the honor roll. He looked up when I appeared in his doorway, pencil poised over his math worksheet. "Need help with anything?" I asked. "Nope, this is pretty easy. Did you want something?" I sat on the edge of his bed, trying to find the words. "Jake, Mrs. Rodriguez showed me some of your work today. Your essay about heroes, your progress reports, some other things." He set down his pencil and turned to face me fully. "Was it okay that I wrote about you?" "It was more than okay. It was amazing. But I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. Are you happy living here with me? Do you feel like you're missing out on anything?" Jake's expression grew serious, the way it did when he was really thinking about something important. "Dad, do you remember when Tommy's parents got divorced last year?" I nodded. Tommy was really sad because he had to go back and forth between houses, and his parents were always fighting about stuff. And his mom was always crying, and his dad moved far away. Tommy said he wished his parents had never gotten married because then maybe they wouldn't hate each other so much. I remember you telling me about that. Well, I felt bad for Tommy, but I also felt kind of glad that our divorce wasn't like that. You and Mom don't fight. You don't say mean things about her. And I get to stay in one place with you instead of moving around all the time. The wisdom in his observation took my breath away. At 8 years old, Jake had developed a perspective on our situation that was more mature and balanced than most adults could manage. "So no," he continued, "I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I feel like I got the good parts of having divorced parents without the bad parts. And I feel like you try extra hard to make sure I'm okay because you love me so much." There it was, the truth I had been too worried and self-critical to see. Jake didn't feel deprived or damaged by our circumstances. He felt cherished. The car ride home from school the day after my conference with Mrs. Rodriguez felt different. Instead of the usual background anxiety about whether I was handling everything correctly, I found myself really listening to Jake's chatter about his day with New Year's. "Dad, guess what happened in art class today?" Jake said, bouncing slightly in his booster seat. "What happened?" Mrs. Peterson was showing us different kinds of families in famous paintings, and she had this one picture of just a dad and a kid fishing, and Connor said that wasn't a real family because there was no mom, and Mrs. Peterson said that families come in all different shapes. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. What did you think about that? I thought Connor was being dumb, Jake said. I mean, we're a real family, right? Just because it's me and you doesn't make us fake. The confidence in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a child trying to convince himself of something. This was a kid who genuinely believed what he was saying. Then Sarah Martinez said she lives with her grandma and her uncle, and Miguel said he has 2 moms. And pretty soon everyone was talking about their families. Mrs. Peterson said mine sounded really cool because you do dad stuff and mom stuff. How did that make you feel? Good, I guess. I told everyone about how you learned to braid my hair and how you come to all my soccer games and help me with homework. And then Connor said his dad doesn't even know what grade he's in. The casual way Jake shared this information told me everything I needed to know about his perspective on our situation. He wasn't comparing our family to others and finding it lacking. He was comparing it to others and feeling proud. Jake, I said carefully, do you ever wish things were different? That mom still lived with us? Or that you had a different kind of family? Jake was quiet for a moment, and I could see him thinking seriously about the question. Sometimes I wish mom called more, he said finally. But not because I want her to live with us again. Just because it would be nice to tell her about school and soccer and stuff. What about having a mom around the house? Do you ever wish for that? Not really, he said, surprising me with his certainty. I mean, it might be nice sometimes, but I like how we do things. I like that when I have a bad dream, you let me sleep in your bed. I like that we order pizza on Friday nights and watch movies. I like that you actually listen when I tell you about my day. Other dads don't do that. Some do, but a lot of kids complain that their parents don't pay attention. Like Emma's always trying to tell her mom about something that happened at school, but her mom is always on her phone or doing something else. And Ben's dad travels all the time for work, so Ben barely sees him. Jake paused, then added, I think you pay attention to me more because it's just us. Like you don't have to split your attention between me and a wife. The sophistication of his observation stunned me. At 8 years old, Jake had figured out something that had taken me 3 years to understand. Our family structure wasn't a limitation. It was an advantage in some ways. When we got home, Jake headed straight to his room to start his homework while I began preparing dinner. A few minutes later, he appeared in the kitchen doorway with a shoebox in his hands. Dad, can I show you something? Of course. He set the box on the counter and opened it carefully. Inside was a collection of items I'd never seen before. Drawings he'd made of the 2 of us. Photos from soccer games, certificates from school, and a stack of what looked like cards. What's all this? It's my memory box, Jake said, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. I put stuff in here that makes me happy. He pulled out the cards, and I realized they were the Father's Day cards he'd made me over the years. Starting with a crayon drawing from when he was 5. I remembered each one, but seeing them collected together was overwhelming. Look at this one, Jake said, showing me the most recent card. On the front, he'd drawn the 2 of us playing soccer, and inside he'd written, Dear Dad, thank you for being my teammate in everything. You're the best dad in the whole world, and I'm lucky you're mine. Jake, this is amazing. How long have you been keeping this box? Since right after Mom moved away, he said. I was sad at first, but then I started noticing all the good things about living with just you. So I decided to save them. He showed me each item, explaining its significance. A photo of us at his first soccer game. You looked so proud when I scored. A drawing of our apartment. I like that it's cozy and feels safe. A ticket stub from a movie we'd seen together. You let me pick even though it was a kid movie and you probably thought it was boring. This is my favorite, he said, pulling out a folded piece of paper. It was a list titled, Why My Dad is the Best. Written in his careful handwriting. He never yells at me, even when I mess up. He makes the best pancakes. He learned to braid hair just for me. He comes to all my soccer games. Even when he's tired, he reads to me every night. He helps me with homework without getting frustrated. He lets me talk about my feelings. He gives the best hugs. He makes me feel safe. He loves me no matter what. When did you write this? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. A few weeks ago. We had to write about someone important to us for English class. But I didn't want to turn it in because it was too personal. But I wanted to remember all the reasons why I love living with you. I pulled Jake into a hug, overwhelmed by the evidence of how secure and loved he felt. All this time, while I'd been worrying about whether I was enough, he'd been cataloging the ways I exceeded his expectations. Jake, can I ask you something? When Grandma and Aunt Jessica say that boys need their moms, how does that make you feel? Jake's expression grew thoughtful. It makes me feel confused at first, because I know I'm okay without Mom living here. Then it makes me feel kind of mad, because it seems like they think you're not a good parent. But mostly it makes me feel sorry for them. Sorry for them. Yeah, because they don't get to see how awesome you are every day, like I do. They don't know about all the little things that make you such a good dad. They just think about the big stuff, like whether you're a mom or a dad. Instead of thinking about whether you're a good parent, out of the mouths of babes, my 8-year-old son had articulated something that had taken me years to understand. And he'd done it with the clarity that only comes from lived experience. Dad, Jake said as he carefully put his treasures back in the box. I think the people who say boys need their moms are wrong. I think boys need parents who love them and take care of them. It doesn't matter if it's a mom or a dad or both or grandparents or whoever. What matters is that they feel safe and happy and loved. You feel all those things every day," he said with absolute certainty. "Do you?" The question caught me off guard. Did I feel safe and happy and loved? For 3 years, I'd been so focused on whether I was providing those things for Jake that I'd never considered whether I was experiencing them myself. But looking at Jake's memory box, reading his list, seeing the evidence of our bond, I felt loved, deeply, unconditionally loved by this remarkable little boy who had chosen to see our situation as an adventure rather than a loss. "Yeah, buddy," I said, "I do." That night, after Jake was asleep, I found myself pulling out the divorce papers for the first time in over a year. The legal language felt cold and clinical now, reducing the end of my marriage to custody schedules and property division. But what struck me most was how different I felt reading them compared to 3 years ago, when I'd first signed these papers. I'd been consumed with fear and doubt. Sarah's departure had felt like a personal failure, proof that I couldn't maintain a family or provide what my wife needed. Her decision to move across the country had seemed like the final verdict on my inadequacy as a husband and, by extension, as a potential single parent. But now, with Jake's essay and Mrs. Rodriguez's words fresh in my mind, I saw the situation differently. Sarah's leaving hadn't been about my failures, it had been about her choices. Her decision to prioritize a new relationship over being present for Jake hadn't reflected my shortcomings as a co-parent. It had revealed her own priorities. The custody arrangement we'd agreed to seemed almost laughable now. Sarah was supposed to have Jake for summers and alternating holidays, with weekly phone calls and regular visits. In 3 years, she'd managed exactly one summer visit, cut short by a week because David wanted to take a couple's trip, 3 brief holiday visits, and sporadic phone calls that had dwindled to maybe once a month. I'd spent so much energy trying to make excuses for her absence, trying to protect Jake from the reality that his mother had essentially walked away from active parenting. But Jake had figured it out on his own and had somehow processed it in a healthier way than I had. My family's criticism made more sense now too, though it didn't make it any less wrong. They'd been so focused on the traditional idea that children need both parents that they'd failed to see that Jake actually had what he needed: one parent who was completely devoted to him. I thought about my own childhood, raised by 2 parents who were physically present but emotionally distant. Dad worked long hours and spent his evenings reading the paper or watching TV. Mom managed the household efficiently but treated child-rearing as a series of tasks to be completed rather than relationships to be nurtured. I'd had a mother and a father, but I'd never felt the kind of security and emotional connection that Jake described feeling with me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been so worried about replicating my parents' traditional family structure that I'd almost missed the fact that I was already providing something better: genuine, emotional availability and presence. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night. Could we have lunch this weekend? I'd like to talk more." For the first time in 3 years, the prospect of a conversation with my mother about Jake didn't fill me with dread. Mrs. Rodriguez's validation had given me something I'd been lacking: confidence in my own parenting choices. I started making a mental list of the things I wanted to say to my family, the boundaries I wanted to set, the misconceptions I wanted to correct, but then I stopped myself. The person who most needed to hear these truths wasn't my mother or Jessica or anyone else. It was me. I'd spent 3 years accepting other people's definitions of what Jake needed instead of trusting my own observations and instincts. I'd internalized criticism from people who saw Jake for a few hours at holiday gatherings instead of believing the evidence of our daily life together. The truth was that Jake and I had built something remarkable from the ashes of my failed marriage. We'd created a home where he felt safe enough to be vulnerable, confident enough to stand up for others, and secure enough in my love to take risks and try new things. I pulled out my laptop and started writing. Not an angry letter to my family, or a defensive justification of my choices, but a reflection on what I'd learned about parenting in the past 3 years. "Jake taught me that good parenting isn't about being perfect," I wrote. "It's about being present. It's not about having all the answers. It's about being willing to figure them out together. It's not about fitting into someone else's idea of what a family should look like. It's about creating a home where love is abundant and security is absolute." I wrote about the YouTube tutorials that had taught me to braid hair, and how those late-night learning sessions had shown Jake that I was willing to do whatever it took to meet his needs. I wrote about the soccer practices that had given us shared goals, and the homework sessions that had taught us both patience and persistence. I wrote about the conversations we'd had about divorce, death, friendship, and fairness, conversations that had challenged me to be honest and thoughtful in ways I'd never had to be before becoming a single parent. Most importantly, I wrote about Jake's resilience and wisdom, qualities that hadn't appeared in spite of our circumstances, but because of them. Living in a single-parent household had given him opportunities to develop independence, empathy, and emotional intelligence that might not have emerged in a more traditional family structure. By the time I finished writing, it was past midnight, but I felt clearer about our story than I had in years. Sarah's absence hadn't damaged Jake, it had allowed him to flourish in a different way. My family's concerns hadn't been malicious, but they'd been misguided, and my own fears about being inadequate had prevented me from fully appreciating what Jake and I had accomplished together. I saved the document and closed my laptop, feeling a sense of closure that had been 3 years in the making. Tomorrow, I would call my mother and accept her lunch invitation, but this time, I would go as a confident father who had proof of his success, not as a defensive son seeking approval. The divorce papers went back into their folder, where they would stay. That chapter of my life was over, and Jake and I were ready to write the next one together, as the strong, happy family we'd always been, even when I'd been too worried to see it. The annual Thompson family barbecue had always felt like a performance review. I was destined to fail. This year, as Jake and I walked up the familiar driveway, carrying his latest report card and the folder of recognition from school, I felt different, not defensive or anxious, but calm and confident. Jake sensed the change too. "Dad, you seem more relaxed today," he observed as we approached the front door. "I am more relaxed. I'm actually looking forward to this." "Really? Usually you get kind of tense before family parties." The fact that my 8-year-old had noticed my previous anxiety made me realize how much my own insecurity had affected him. I think I used to worry too much about what everyone thought, but now I know what's important. Mom opened the door before we could knock, pulling Jake into one of her enthusiastic hugs. "There's my grandson, Marcus. You both look wonderful." The usual cast of characters was assembled in the backyard. Jessica and her husband Tom with their 2 kids, my brother Mark with his girlfriend, various aunts and uncles, and Dad manning the grill with his characteristic stoic concentration. "Marcus," Jessica called out from the patio table where she was arranging a spread that looked like it belonged in a magazine. "How are things? How's Jake doing in school?" This was typically the opening salvo in the campaign of concerned questions about Jake's well-being. In the past, I would have given vague defensive answers, designed to deflect further scrutiny. Today, I smiled genuinely. "Jake's doing amazingly well in school. In fact, we have some news to share." I pulled out Jake's latest report card, which featured straight A's and glowing comments from his teachers. Jake made the honor roll again, and he's been selected for the accelerated learning program next year. The reaction was immediate and positive, but I could see the underlying surprise on several faces. They'd been so focused on what Jake might be lacking that they'd never considered he might be excelling. "That's wonderful," Mom said, examining the report card. "These comments from his teachers are remarkable." "There's more," I said, pulling out Mrs. Rodriguez's notes and Jake's essay. "His teacher asked me to come in for a special conference, because she wanted to tell me that Jake is one of the most emotionally mature and academically gifted students she's taught in 18 years. Jessica's expression shifted from her usual concerned aunt mode to genuine interest. "Really? What did she say specifically?" I shared Mrs. Rodriguez's observations about Jake's leadership qualities, his empathy for other children, and his confidence in presenting about different family structures. As I spoke, I watched my family's faces change from polite attention to genuine amazement. "She called me Father of the Year," I said simply. She said that Jake's emotional intelligence and academic success are direct reflections of the parenting he receives at home. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortably, was thoughtful. I could see everyone processing this information, reconciling it with their previous concerns about our family situation. "Can we read the essay?" Mom asked quietly. I looked at Jake, who nodded his permission. As the essay was passed around the group, I watched my family read Jake's words about feeling safe, loved, and proud of our life together. His description of our daily routines, his appreciation for my efforts to learn new skills for his benefit, his clear statement that he wouldn't change anything about our family. It was all there in his own 8-year-old handwriting. Uncle Robert, who had been one of the most vocal critics of my single parenting, looked up from the essay with tears in his eyes. "Marcus, this is incredible. This boy clearly adores you." "The feeling is mutual," I said, ruffling Jake's hair as he leaned against my chair. "Dad," Jake said suddenly, "can I tell them about the memory box?" I nodded, and Jake launched into an enthusiastic description of his collection of mementos from our life together. He talked about our movie nights, our soccer adventures, the way I helped him with homework, and his favorite memories from the past 3 years. "The best part," Jake concluded, "is that Dad always has time for me, like even when he's tired from work, he still wants to hear about my day and help me with stuff. And when I'm scared or sad, he always knows what to say to make me feel better." Jessica, who had been unusually quiet during Jake's presentation, finally spoke up. "Jake, honey, do you ever feel like you're missing out on anything? Like, do you ever wish you had a mom around more?" Jake considered the question seriously, the way he always did when adults asked him something important. "I think I used to feel sad about Mom not being here, but not anymore. Dad does all the mom stuff and dad stuff, so I don't really feel like I'm missing anything. Plus, some of my friends have moms and dads who are always fighting, or who don't. Pay attention to them. I'd rather have one parent who really loves me than 2 parents who make me feel bad." The wisdom in his response left the adults speechless. My nephew Tommy, who is a year older than Jake, piped up. I wish my dad came to my soccer games like Uncle Marcus does. He's always too busy. And I wish my mom helped me with homework, instead of just telling me to figure it out myself, added my niece Sarah. Suddenly, the conversation shifted from concerns about what Jake was lacking to recognition of what he had in abundance. The other children started sharing examples of how their own parents were often distracted, unavailable, or inconsistent, while Jake had a father who was present, engaged, and completely focused on his well-being. Dad, who had been quietly listening from his position at the grill, finally walked over. Marcus, I owe you an apology. We've been so worried about what Jake might be missing that we failed to see what he was gaining. That boy is remarkable, and it's clear that he's remarkable because of the father he has. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. Mom was examining the report card again, shaking her head in amazement. Marcus, these teacher comments, listen to this. Jake demonstrates exceptional empathy and maturity. He is a natural leader who makes other children feel included and valued. His academic work is consistently excellent, but his character is what makes him truly special. She looked up at me with new understanding. I don't think we realized how well you were doing. We were so focused on our own ideas about what families should look like that we missed what your family actually looks like. What does it look like? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. It looks like love, she said simply. It looks like a father who has dedicated himself completely to his son's happiness and development. It looks like a child who feels completely secure and confident because he knows he's the most important thing in his father's world. Jessica nodded in agreement. I think we owe you more than an apology, Marcus. We owe you recognition for what you've accomplished. Single parenting isn't easy, and you've not just managed it, mastered it. As the afternoon continued, the conversation remained focused on Jake's achievements and our family's successes. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like we belonged at these gatherings not as objects of concern, but as valued members of the family whose story was worth celebrating. When it was time to leave, Jake was reluctant to go. Can we stay a little longer, Dad? Everyone's being so nice today. They're being nice because they finally understand what I've known all along. I told him that we're doing just fine. In the car on the way home, Jake was unusually reflective. Dad, why do you think everyone was so worried about us before? I think they love us and wanted to make sure we were okay. But sometimes when people love you, they worry about things that aren't actually problems. Well, I'm glad they understand now. It felt good to have them be proud of us instead of worried about us. How did it feel to share your essay and talk about our family? It felt really good. Like I've always known that we're a good team, but now they know it too. That night, as I tucked Jake into bed, he looked up at me with a satisfied smile. Dad, today was the best family barbecue ever. Why? Because for the first time, it felt like they saw us the way we really are. And for the first time in 3 years, I couldn't have agreed more. The momentum from the family barbecue carried into the following weeks, but it also brought unexpected challenges. With my family's newfound acceptance came a flood of questions and comments that, while well-intentioned, sometimes felt invasive. You've done such a wonderful job with Jake, Mom said during one of her now frequent phone calls. Have you thought about dating? Jake might benefit from having a mother figure in his life. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years of criticism about my single parenting had transformed, overnight, into suggestions about finding a stepmother for Jake. It was as if my family couldn't quite accept that. Our two-person family was complete as it was. Mom, I said gently but firmly, Jake and I are happy with our family exactly as it is. We're not looking to add anyone. But surely you must get lonely. I'm not lonely. I have Jake, I have friends, I have a full life. And more importantly, Jake isn't lacking anything. Mrs. Rodriguez confirmed that. The conversation reminded me of how important it was to maintain the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. Acceptance of our success didn't automatically translate to acceptance of our choices. This became even clearer when Jessica called a few days later with what she clearly thought was helpful news. Marcus, I have a friend whose sister just moved. 2 tons. She's divorced, has a daughter Jake's age, and she's really sweet. I thought maybe Jessica. Stop, I interrupted. I appreciate that you're trying to help, but Jake and I aren't looking for anyone to complete our family. We're already complete. But think about Jake. Wouldn't it be nice for him to have a sister? And for you to have someone to share the parenting responsibilities with? I pulled out the photo album I'd started putting together after the barbecue. 3 years worth of memories that told the story of our journey. Pictures of Jake's first soccer goal, both of us covered in flour from a disastrous attempt at homemade cookies, quiet moments reading together, birthday celebrations, holidays, and countless ordinary days that had made up our extraordinary life. Together. Jessica, look at this, I said, showing her the album during her next visit. This is what our family looks like. This is Jake's childhood. Does this look like a child who's missing something essential? She flipped through the pages slowly, and I could see her understanding shift with each image. There were pictures of Jake helping me cook dinner, both of us laughing at some shared joke. Photos from school events where Jake beamed with pride as I cheered from the audience. Images of our camping trips, our movie nights, our lazy Saturday mornings. Oh my God, Marcus, she said softly. You two really do have something special, don't you? We do, and it's not something that needs to be fixed or improved or completed by adding someone else. It's perfect exactly as it is. But what about companionship for you? Don't you want someone to share your life with? I do share my life with someone. I share it with Jake. And yes, someday I might be interested in dating again, but it won't be because Jake needs a mother, or because our family is incomplete. It will be because I meet someone who adds to our happiness without being necessary for it. The distinction was important, and I could see Jessica processing it. The difference between seeking a relationship from a place of lack versus seeking one from a place of abundance. Jake had been listening to this conversation from the kitchen, where he was supposedly doing homework. He wandered into the living room carrying his math worksheet. Aunt Jessica, he said with the directness that only children possess. Why does everyone think Dad needs a girlfriend? Jessica looked flustered. Well, honey, adults sometimes like to have partners to share their lives with, but Dad shares his life with me, Jake said matter-of-factly, and I don't want to share him with someone else right now. We like our family the way it is. What if Dad met someone really nice who made him happy? Jake considered this seriously. If she made Dad happy and didn't try to change our family or tell us we were doing things wrong, then maybe that would be okay. But if Dad is already happy, then why does he need someone else? Out of the mouths of babes again. After Jessica left, Jake and I had a conversation about the sudden shift in our family's attitude and expectations. Dad, are you going to start dating because everyone thinks you should? No, Jake, I'm not going to make decisions about our family based on what other people think we need. I learned that lesson pretty thoroughly over the past 3 years. Good. I mean, if you wanted to date someone, that would be okay. But I don't want you to do it because people think we're weird for being happy with just us. We're not weird, buddy. We're different. And different isn't wrong. I know that now, but it took a while to figure out. That evening, I started drafting what I privately called my standing ground speech, a clear, kind but firm statement about our family's boundaries and choices. I planned to use it the next time someone suggested that our happiness was temporary or incomplete. Jake and I have built a strong, loving family over the past 3 years, I wrote. We've faced challenges together, celebrated successes together, and created a home where both of us feel completely loved and supported. Our family works beautifully exactly as it is. While we appreciate your concern and suggestions, we're not looking to change or add to our family structure right now. We hope you can respect and support our choices the way we've learned to respect and support yours. The speech was tested sooner than I expected. At Jake's next soccer game, one of the other parents, Carol, approached me during halftime. Marcus, I've been watching you with Jake, and you're such a devoted father. I have a friend who's recently divorced, and I thought you two might really hit it off. She has kids too, so she'd understand the challenges of single parenting. I smiled politely, and launched into my prepared response. Carol listened with growing understanding, and by the end, she was nodding in agreement. You know what? You're absolutely right. I'm sorry for assuming you needed fixing. You and Jake seem really happy. We are happy, and if that changes someday, we'll figure it out together. As I watched Jake play in the second half, scoring 2 goals and celebrating each one by looking directly at me in the stands, I felt a deep sense of contentment. We'd come so far from those early days of doubt and criticism. We'd proven to everyone, including ourselves, that love is what makes a family, not structure or convention. The photo album beside me on the bench told our story better than any words could, to people who'd found their way through loss and uncertainty to create something beautiful together. Something that didn't need anyone else's approval or suggestions for improvement. Something that was exactly perfect as it was. The handwritten letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, my mother's familiar script flowing across cream-colored stationery. I almost set it aside to read later, assuming it was another invitation to Sunday dinner or update about family news. But something about the careful way my name was written on the envelope made me open it immediately. Dear Marcus, it began. I've been thinking about our conversation after the barbecue, and I realize I owe you more than a simple apology. I owe you an acknowledgement of something I should have seen years ago. I settled into my kitchen chair, with my coffee, giving the letter my full attention. When you and Sarah divorced, I was devastated, not because I particularly loved Sarah, but because I'd invested so much of my identity in the idea of our family being normal and complete. When she left, it felt like a failure of the values I'd tried to instill in you about marriage and family commitment. I realize now that I projected my own fears and disappointments onto your situation with Jake. I was so worried about how the divorce would affect him that I never stopped to actually observe how he was doing. I was so focused on what he was missing that I completely failed to see what he was gaining. Watching Jake at the barbecue, seeing his confidence and happiness, reading his essay about Hewitt was like seeing him clearly for the first time in 3 years. And what I saw was a child who is not just surviving but thriving in ways that many children in traditional two-parent homes never do. I've been a mother for over 40 years, Marcus, and I can tell you that the kind of emotional security and confidence Jake displays doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a child knows, beyond any doubt, that they are the most important thing in their parents' world. Jake knows that about you, and it shows in everything he does. I've also been thinking about my own childhood and yours. Your father and I provided you with stability and material security, but I'm not sure we gave you the kind of emotional intimacy and attention that you give Jake every day. In trying to maintain the appearance of a perfect family, I think we sometimes forgot to focus on actually connecting with our children. You've done something remarkable, Marcus. You've raised a son who feels completely loved and secure. You've created a home where emotions are honored, where mistakes are met with understanding, and where a child's voice is truly heard. That's not just good parenting, it's exceptional parenting. I hope you can forgive me for the years of doubt and criticism. I hope you can understand that my concerns came from love, even though they were misguided. And I hope you know that I am incredibly proud of the father you've become and the family you've built with Jake. With all my love and respect, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of meaning. This wasn't just an apology, it was recognition, validation, and acknowledgement of something I'd worked so hard to achieve. The phone rang as I was folding the letter carefully back into its envelope. Did you get my letter? Mom asked, without preamble. I just finished reading it. Mom, this means more to me than you know. I've been thinking about writing it for weeks, ever since the barbecue. I kept remembering things like how Jake always runs to you first when he's excited about something, or how he automatically reaches for your hand when he's nervous. Those aren't the behaviors of a child who's missing something essential. It took me a while to see it too, I admitted. I was so busy worrying about whether I was enough that I almost missed the evidence that I was. You're more than enough, Marcus. You're everything that boy needs, and more importantly, you're everything he wants. The way he talks about you, the pride in his voice when he describes your life together. I don't think I've ever seen a child more secure in their parents' love. Over the following weeks, other family members reached out with their own versions of acknowledgement and support. Jessica called to apologize for her assumptions and to tell me that she'd been watching her own children more carefully, realizing that her physically present but emotionally distracted parenting style might not be as ideal as she'd assumed. Tommy asked me yesterday why Uncle Marcus always knows what Jake is thinking about, and I realized I couldn't answer that question because I don't always know what my own kids are thinking about, she admitted. You have something with Jake that I'm still trying to figure out how to create with my children. Uncle Robert, who had been one of the most vocal critics of single parenting, stopped by one evening with a confession that surprised me. Marcus, I need to tell you something. I've been married for 35 years, and I don't think I've ever had the kind of relationship with my kids that you have with Jake. When I watch you two together, I see something I wish I'd known how to create with my own children. It's not too late, I told him. Your kids are adults now, but relationships can always get deeper. You're right. In fact, watching you has inspired me to try harder with my grandchildren. I want to be the kind of grandfather to them that you are, as a father to Jake. The most unexpected ally turned out to be my brother Mark's girlfriend, Rachel, who had been quiet during most family gatherings, but had apparently been observing everything. I hope this doesn't sound weird, she said after a family dinner, but I've been watching how you parent Jake, and I've been taking notes. Taking notes. Mark and I are talking about having kids someday, and I've realized that most of what I thought I knew about parenting came from movies and TV shows. But watching you with Jake has shown me what real parenting looks like. The way you listen to him, the way you help him work through problems, instead of just solving them for him, the way you celebrate his successes. It's like a masterclass in how to raise a confident, kind child. She pulled out her phone and showed me a note she'd written. Ask questions that show genuine interest, validate feelings before addressing behavior, be physically present but not overwhelming, let natural consequences teach lessons, celebrate effort as much as achievement. You've been writing down my parenting techniques? The good ones, yes. I figure if Jake turns out as amazing as he seems to be turning out, then whatever you're doing must be working. These conversations with family members revealed something I hadn't expected. Rather than being the cautionary tale they'd once seen us as, Jake and I had become an example of something positive. Our bond, our communication, our obvious enjoyment of each other's company, it had become something others wanted to emulate rather than fix. The shift was profound and healing. Instead of defending our choices, I found myself sharing strategies and insights with family members who genuinely wanted to improve their own relationships with their children. But the most meaningful validation came from Jake himself, who had overheard several of these conversations. Dad, he said one evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, I like that everyone understands us now, but I need you to know something. What's that? Even when they didn't understand, even when they thought we were doing things wrong, I always knew we were doing things right. I never doubted that you were a good dad, even when other people did. The wisdom and loyalty in his words took my breath away. While I'd been struggling with external validation and internal doubt, Jake had been quietly confident in our relationship all along. That means everything to me, buddy, I know, and Dad. I think you helped them become better parents too. Uncle Robert has been asking me more questions when he sees me, and Aunt Jessica actually listened to Tommy's whole story about school yesterday, instead of just saying, "That's nice, My 8-year-old son had noticed that our family's journey had created positive ripple effects for other relationships. We hadn't just proven that our family worked, we'd inspired others to examine and improve their own family dynamics. It was more than I'd ever dared to hope for when this journey began. The call came on a Thursday evening while Jake and I were working on a science project about the solar system. My phone displayed Sarah's name, which was unusual. She typically called on Sunday afternoons, if she called at all. Marcus. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. We're just doing homework. Is everything okay? Actually, I was calling to talk about Jake's summer plans. I know we usually work something out, but this year, I was hoping he could come stay with David and me for a longer visit, maybe 6 weeks instead of the usual 2. I felt Jake stiffen beside me. He could hear his mother's voice through the phone, and he was listening intently. Can I ask what's prompted this? I said carefully. Well, David and I have been talking about starting our own family soon, and we thought it would be good for Jake to spend more time here. You know, to bond with David and get used to the idea of having siblings eventually. The casual way she mentioned her plans to have other children, as if Jake's feelings about potentially being replaced were an afterthought, irritated me more than I wanted to admit. Sarah, Jake has school commitments here, soccer camp, and plans. With his friends, 6 weeks would mean missing a lot of important activities. But Marcus, this is about family. Surely those activities aren't more important than Jake getting to know his future stepfather and potential siblings. I looked at Jake, who was shaking his head almost imperceptibly. His message was clear. He didn't want to go. Let me talk to Jake about it and get back to you, I said. Actually, could I talk to him now? I'd like to ask him directly what he thinks. Before I could respond, Jake was already reaching for the phone. Hi, Mom. I listened to one side of a conversation that grew increasingly tense. Jake's responses were polite but firm. I don't really want to miss soccer camp. I have plans with my friends here. I like visiting for 2 weeks, but 6 weeks seems really long. Finally, Jake handed the phone back to me with a look that was part relief, part frustration. She wants to talk to you again, he said. Marcus, I don't understand Jake's attitude. This is his chance to be part of a real family again. David is willing to be a father figure to him, and we're offering him the opportunity to have siblings. Why would he choose summer camp over that? The phrase real family hit me like a slap. Everything we'd built together, all the validation from teachers and family members, all of Jake's expressed happiness and security, apparently none of that constituted a real family in Sarah's mind. Sarah, Jake has a real family. He has a home where he feels loved and secure, activities he's committed to, and friends who matter to him. 2 weeks is what we agreed on, and that's what we're sticking with. But he needs more than what you can give him, Marcus. He needs siblings. He needs a mother figure. According to whom? I interrupted. According to his teacher, Jake is one of the most emotionally mature and academically successful children in his class. According to his soccer coach, he's a natural leader. According to everyone who actually spends time with him, he's thriving. But he could thrive even more with a complete family. Sarah, stop. Just stop. Jake and I are a complete family. We have been for 3 years, and we're doing just fine. The conversation ended with Sarah agreeing to stick to the original 2-week plan, but her tone suggested this wasn't over. After I hung up, Jake looked at me with worried eyes. Dad, I don't want to go for 6 weeks. I don't want to miss soccer camp, or my friends, or being here with you. You don't have to go for 6 weeks. We had an agreement, and I'm not changing it just because she suddenly wants more time. But what if she gets mad? What if she says I have to come anyway? This was the conversation I'd been dreading for 3 years. The moment when Jake would have to grapple with the reality that his mother's priorities didn't always align with his own needs or desires. Jake, your mom can't make you do anything. That's not in the original custody agreement. And the custody agreement says 2 weeks in the summer, which is what we've always done. Why does she think we're not a real family? The question pierced my heart. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that some people have narrow definitions of what families should look like? Some people think families have to look a certain way to be real or valid, but you and I know that families are about love and care and being there for each other. By that definition, we're as real as any family gets. I think Mom might be jealous, Jake said with startling insight. Jealous of what? Of how happy we are. When I talk to her on the phone, I tell her about school and soccer and stuff we do together, and she always sounds kind of sad. Maybe she wishes her family was as happy as ours. The emotional intelligence in his observation amazed me. At 8 years old, Jake had recognized something that had taken me much longer to understand. Sarah's sudden interest in more custody time wasn't necessarily about missing Jake, it might be about wanting what we had. That's very perceptive, buddy, and very mature of you to think about her feelings, even when you're upset about what she said. I do miss her sometimes, but I don't want to live with her. I like living with you. This is my home. Over the next few days, Sarah called twice more, each time with slightly different arguments for why Jake should spend more time in Portland. First, it was about giving him a broader perspective on family life. Then it was about David wanting to really get to know his future stepson. Each conversation made it clearer that Sarah was operating from a fundamentally different understanding of what was best for Jake. She seemed to view our life together as a temporary arrangement that should naturally evolve towards something more traditional, rather than recognizing it as a permanent and successful family structure. Jake, meanwhile, became increasingly confident in expressing his preferences. When Sarah called to ask him directly about visiting for the whole summer, he calmly but firmly explained his position. "Mom, I love you, and I like visiting, but I don't want to live in Portland. My life is here with Dad. My friends are here. My school is here. My soccer team is here. 2 weeks is enough for visiting." "But Jake, don't you want to be part of a bigger family? Don't you want to have a stepmom and maybe brothers and sisters someday?" "I already have a family. Dad and I are a family. If you want to have more kids with David, that's okay, but I don't need siblings to be happy. I'm happy with how things are." The clarity and confidence in Jake's response filled me with pride. He wasn't rejecting his mother out of anger or resentment. He was simply stating his preference based on where he felt most secure and fulfilled. After that conversation, Sarah's calls became less frequent again. The urgency around extended summer visits seemed to fade, replaced by what felt like resignation. "I think she finally gets it," Jake said after a brief, cordial phone call with his mother. "I think she understands that I'm not going to change my mind about where I want to live." "How do you feel about that?" "Good, mostly. A little sad for her, because I think she really wanted me to want to live there. But I can't pretend to want something I don't want just to make her feel better." Once again, my son had demonstrated wisdom beyond his years. He'd learned to honor his own needs and preferences while still maintaining compassion for others, a skill that many adults never master. The experience reinforced something I'd been learning gradually. Jake's happiness and security weren't accidents or temporary states that could be easily disrupted. They were the products of years of consistent love, attention, and respect for his autonomy. Sarah's attempts to pull him toward a different life hadn't threatened our bond, they'd actually strengthened it by giving Jake the opportunity to consciously choose where he belonged. Jake's journal entry was sitting on my bedside table when I came home from work the next day, left there deliberately for me to find. The notebook was one I'd bought him for Christmas, encouraging him to write about his thoughts and feelings. As a way to process the complexities of growing up in a divorced family, Dad, the entry began in his careful handwriting. "I wanted to write this down so I could show you how I really feel about everything that's been happening with Mom. Mom wants me to come live with her and David, and I know she thinks that would be better for me, but I don't think she understands what my life is really like here with you. She thinks I'm missing something, but I'm not missing anything. When I wake up in the morning, you're always there to make breakfast and ask me about my dreams. When I come home from school, you want to hear about my day, and you really listen to my answers. When I have problems, you help me figure them out instead of just telling me what to do. When I'm scared, you make me feel safe. When I'm happy, you're happy too. I think Mom loves me, but I don't think she really knows me anymore. When we talk on the phone, she asks questions about school and soccer, but when I answer, it feels like she's not really paying attention. She wants to know if I'm okay, but she doesn't seem to care about the little things that make me who I am. You know that I like my sandwiches cut diagonally, and that I get nervous before math tests, and that I feel sad when I see homeless people. You know that I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up, and that my favorite color changed from blue to green last month. You know me. I don't think living with Mom and David would be bad, but I know living with you is perfect for me. I feel like myself when I'm here. I feel like you like me exactly the way I am, and you don't want me to be different. I hope this doesn't hurt Mom's feelings, but I want to stay here with you forever. Not just until I'm 18, but even when I'm grown up. I want to live close to you, so we can still see each other all the time. I hope that's okay with you. Love, Jake. P.S. I'm really proud that Mrs. Rodriguez called you Father of the Year. I always knew you were the best dad, but now everyone else knows it too. I sat on the edge of my bed, reading Jake's words through tears. I didn't try to hide the maturity and clarity of his thoughts, the depth of his understanding about our relationship, the confidence with which he expressed his was overwhelming. When Jake appeared in my doorway a few minutes later, he took one look at my face and immediately sat down next to me. "Are you crying because you're sad or because you're happy?" he asked. "Happy," I managed to say. "Incredibly, overwhelmingly happy." "Good. I was worried you might think I was being mean to Mom." "You weren't being mean. You were being honest about your feelings, and that's never wrong. But Jake, I need you to know that if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to try living with your mom for a while, that would be okay too." Jake shook his head firmly. "I won't change my mind. This is my home. You're my family. I might visit Mom sometimes, but I'll always want to come back here." "What makes you so sure?" "Because when I'm here, I feel like the most important person in the world to you. And when I'm with Mom, I feel like I'm one of many things she has to think about." The distinction he'd drawn was both heartbreaking and incredibly insightful. Jake had recognized the difference between being someone's priority and being someone's obligation. "Jake, can I ask you something? Are you worried that my feelings would be hurt if you wanted to spend more time with your mom?" "A little bit, maybe, but mostly I just really don't want to. I've thought about it a lot, and I always come back to the same answer. I want to be here with you, and you're not just saying that because you think it's what I want to hear." "Dad, if I wanted to live with Mom, would you try to stop me?" No, I wouldn't. It would make me incredibly sad, but I'd want you to be where you felt happiest and most loved. See, that's exactly why I want to stay here. You want what's best for me, even if it's not what's best for you. Mom wants what she thinks is best for me, but it's also what's best for her. Once again, Jake had articulated something profound about the nature of love and parenting. True love sometimes means wanting what's best for someone even when it conflicts with your own desires. We talked for another hour about his feelings toward his mother, his thoughts about their relationship, and his vision for our future together. Jake had clearly given serious consideration to all aspects of his situation and had reached his conclusion based on careful reflection rather than impulse or loyalty. I do love Mom, he said as our conversation wound down, but I love her like I love Grandma or Aunt Jessica, people who are important to me, but not people I want to live with. You're the person I want to live with because you're the person who makes me feel most like myself. The next morning, I called Sarah to have what I knew would be a difficult conversation. Sarah, Jake and I talked extensively about the summer plans and about his living situation in general. I think you need to hear directly from me what he's decided. I hope you haven't been influencing his decision. I haven't influenced anything. If anything, I've encouraged him to really think about what would make him happiest, even if that meant choosing to live with you. I explained Jake's perspective as clearly and kindly as I could, emphasizing his maturity and the thoughtfulness behind his decision. I shared some of what he'd written in his journal, hoping Sarah could hear the confidence and contentment in his words. He's not rejecting you, Sarah. He's choosing the life that feels most comfortable and secure to him. That happens to be here with me, but it's not a reflection of his feelings about you personally. There was a long silence before Sarah responded. I guess I thought that once he experienced what a traditional family could offer, he'd want that. For himself, Jake doesn't feel like he's missing anything from his life. According to everyone who spends time with him, teachers, coaches, family members, he's thriving exactly where he is. But he could thrive even more, Sarah. He couldn't thrive more. He's academically advanced, socially confident, emotionally mature, and genuinely happy. What more could you want for him? Another long pause. I suppose I wanted him to need me the way he needs you. The honesty in her admission was both sad and illuminating. Sarah's desire for extended custody hadn't been about Jake's needs, had been about her own need to feel essential to his life. He does need you, I said gently, just in a different way than he needs me. You're his mother, and that will always matter to him. But his daily needs, his emotional security, his sense of home, those are centered here now. And you're okay with that? You're not worried about him rejecting his mother. Jake isn't rejecting you. He's choosing stability and security. He's choosing the life that has made him happiest and most successful. As his father, that's exactly what I want him to do. When I hung up, I felt a profound sense of closure. Jake had made his choice based on wisdom and self-knowledge that impressed me daily. Sarah had finally understood that choice, even if she didn't love it, and I had learned to trust both Jake's judgment and my own success as his father. That evening, Jake and I celebrated with his favorite dinner, homemade pizza, and a movie night. As we settled in to watch his latest selection, he looked at me with a satisfied smile. Dad, I'm really glad we figured everything out. Me too, buddy. Me too. The letter from the school district arrived on a Tuesday in March, bearing the official seal that usually meant bureaucratic complications. I opened it expecting a notice about testing schedules or budget meetings, but instead found something extraordinary. Dear Mr. Thompson, the letter began. The Jefferson County School District is pleased to inform you that you have been selected as our Parent of the Year for the 2025 academic year. This recognition is based on nominations from teachers, administrators, and fellow parents who have observed your exceptional dedication to your child's education and development. I read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Parent of the Year, not just from Mrs. Rodriguez or Jake's individual school, but from the entire district. The selection committee was particularly impressed by the testimonials, describing your involvement in your son's academic and extracurricular activities, your communication with teachers and school staff, and the positive impact your parenting has had on Jake's classroom leadership and social development. Jake was at soccer practice, so I had an hour to process this recognition before sharing the news. I called Mrs. Rodriguez first. Congratulations, Mr. Thompson. I hope you're not too surprised. I was one of several people who nominated you. I'm completely shocked, I admitted. I just do what any parent would do. That's exactly what makes you special. You don't see your dedication as extraordinary, but it is. The committee received nominations from Jake's current and former teachers, his soccer coach, other parents, and even some of the older students who know Jake. Everyone had stories about your involvement and the positive influence it's had on your son. She went on to explain that the recognition included a ceremony at the school board meeting, a feature in the district newsletter, and a small scholarship fund established in our family's name to help other single parents with educational expenses. There's something else, Mrs. Rodriguez added. The district wants to invite you to speak at next year's parent orientation about effective single parenting. They've never had a single parent receive this recognition before, and they think your story could inspire other families. When Jake came home from practice, grass-stained and energetic, I was still holding the letter in disbelief. "Dad, why do you look weird? Did something bad happen?" "Not bad, actually. Something pretty amazing happened." I showed him the letter, and watched his face light up with understanding. "You won an award for being my dad." "Apparently so." Jake threw his arms around me in one of his enthusiastic hugs. "I'm not surprised. I always knew you were the best dad. Now everyone else knows it too. How do you feel about this?" "Proud. Really, really proud. Can I come to the ceremony?" "Of course you can come. You're half the reason I'm getting this recognition." The ceremony was held 3 weeks later in the school district's main auditorium. As we walked in, I was surprised to see how many people had come: teachers, parents, school board members, and even some of Jake's classmates with their families. Jake wore his best button-down shirt and sat in the front row with my parents, Jessica, and several other family members who had driven in for the occasion. The transformation in my family's attitude was complete. They'd gone from worried critics to proud supporters in the span of a few months. Superintendent Williams introduced me with a speech that highlighted Jake's academic achievements, leadership qualities, and the positive impact our family had had on the school community. She read excerpts from nomination letters that brought tears to my eyes. One teacher wrote, "Jake Thompson is the kind of student every educator hopes to have, not just because he's bright and hardworking, but because he's kind, inclusive, and emotionally mature beyond his years. These qualities are clearly the result of exceptional parenting." Another nomination came from a fellow parent who wrote, "I've watched Marcus Thompson at soccer games, school events, and parent conferences for 3 years. His dedication to Jake is obvious, but what impresses me most is how genuinely he listens to his son and how confidently Jake communicates with adults. Their relationship is something I try to emulate with my own children." When it was time for me to speak, I looked out at the audience and saw Jake giving me an encouraging thumbs up. "3 years ago," I began, "I was convinced that I was failing as a single parent. I listened to well-meaning advice about what boys need, what families should look like, and what constitutes proper child rearing. I second-guessed every decision, and worried constantly that I wasn't enough for my son. I talked about the journey Jake and I had taken together, the challenges we'd faced, and the strength we'd found in each other. I spoke about learning to trust my instincts, to focus on Jake's actual needs rather than other people's expectations, and to recognize that love and dedication could create a family structure that was both unconventional and incredibly successful. "Jake taught me that good parenting isn't about being perfect," I continued. "It's about being present. It's not about having all the answers, it's about being willing to figure them out together. And it's not about fitting into someone else's definition of what a family should look like. It's about creating a home where love is abundant and security is absolute." I concluded by thanking the school district, the teachers who had supported Jake's growth, and the family members who had learned to see our unconventional family as a source of strength rather than concern. Most importantly, I want to thank Jake, who has been my partner in this journey from the beginning. He's taught me more about courage, resilience, and unconditional love than any parenting book ever could. The applause was warm and sustained, but what mattered most was Jake's reaction. He was beaming with pride, not just for the recognition, but for the story we'd built together. After the ceremony, we were surrounded by congratulations and requests for advice from other single parents. Several teachers shared additional stories about Jake's kindness and leadership that I'd never heard before. Parents I barely knew thanked me for being an example of what dedicated parenting could accomplish. But the most meaningful moment came when Coach Martinez pulled me aside. "Marcus, I've been coaching youth soccer for 15 years, and I've never seen a parent-child relationship quite like yours and Jake's. You've raised a young man who's confident without being arrogant, competitive without being cruel, and independent without being detached. That's remarkable. Thank you. Jake makes it easy." "That's exactly what I mean. You've created an environment where Jake feels safe to be his best self. That's not easy, that's exceptional." As we drove home, Jake was unusually quiet, processing the evening's events. "Dad, do you think other single parents will want to hear your speech?" "I hope so. If our story can help other families feel less alone, or more confident, then this recognition means even more." "What would you tell them?" I thought about the question seriously. I'd tell them that their love is enough, that their dedication matters more than their family structure, and that their children are probably doing better than they realize. Those are good things to tell them. That night, as I was tucking Jake into bed, he looked at me with serious eyes. "Dad, I'm really proud of you for winning this award, but I need you to know something." "What's that?" "You were already my parent of the year. You've been my parent of the year every year since Mom left. This award just makes it official." The wisdom and love in his words reminded me once again that the real measure of successful parenting isn't external recognition, it's the security and happiness of the child you're raising. Jake had been trying to tell me for 3 years that I was succeeding. I'd finally learned to listen. As I turned off his light and headed to my own room, I felt a deep sense of contentment. We'd come so far from those early days of doubt and criticism, We'd proven to everyone, including ourselves, that families come in many forms, and that love, consistency, and presence are what make them work. The future stretched ahead of us, full of possibility and adventure. And for the first time since Sarah left, I was completely confident that Jake and I could handle whatever came next together. Jake's elementary school graduation arrived faster than I'd expected, marking the end of an era that had defined both of our lives. As I watched him practice walking across the stage during rehearsal, wearing his miniature cap and gown, I was overwhelmed by how much had changed since that first terrifying day of kindergarten when I'd worried about everything from his lunch preferences to his social development. The boy standing confidently on that stage bore little resemblance to the quiet, uncertain child who had started this journey 3 years ago. Jake moved with assurance, smiled easily at his classmates, and carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're loved unconditionally. "Dad, are you getting emotional already?" Jake teased as we walked to the car. "After rehearsal, the actual ceremony isn't until tomorrow." "I'm practicing," I said, not bothering to hide my pride. "Tomorrow, I'm going to be a complete mess." "Good, I want you to be proud. We did this together." The graduation ceremony was held in the school gymnasium, decorated with handmade banners and filled with families celebrating their children's achievements. As I found my seat in the audience, I was joined by my parents, Jessica and her family, and several other relatives who had come to support Jake's milestone. "Look at that confident young man," Mom said as Jake took his place with his classmates. "It's hard to believe he's the same little boy we were so worried about 3 years ago." "We were wrong to worry," Dad added quietly. "Marcus, you've raised an exceptional child." The validation from my parents still felt new and wonderful, but it was no longer necessary for my own confidence. I knew what Jake and I had accomplished together, regardless of external recognition. Mrs. Rodriguez served as the ceremony's master of ceremonies, and during her opening remarks, she made a comment that caught me off guard. "This graduating class has been special in many ways," she said, "but I want to particularly acknowledge the growth and leadership we've seen from students like Jake Thompson, who have shown us that children thrive when they feel truly seen and valued at home." Jake caught my eye from the stage and grinned, clearly pleased by the recognition but not surprised by it. He'd grown accustomed to positive feedback about our family dynamic. When it was time for individual recognition, Jake walked across the stage to receive his diploma with the same quiet confidence he'd developed in all areas of his life. The principal handed him his certificate and said something that made him smile broadly before he returned to his seat. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and congratulations, the principal approached me. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted to tell you what I said to Jake when he crossed the stage." I told him that in 20 years of elementary education, I've rarely seen a child who embodies such a perfect combination of academic achievement, social leadership, and emotional maturity. That's a direct reflection of the parenting he's received. "Thank you. That means everything to me. I also wanted you to know that Jake will be missed here. He's been a positive influence on every child he's encountered, and that kind of impact is rare at any age." As we posed for photos, Jake in his cap and gown, me beaming with pride, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. 3 years ago, I'd been a frightened, uncertain single father convinced that I was inadequately equipped for the challenge ahead. Today, I was the proud parent of a remarkable young man who was ready for whatever middle school would bring. "Dad, can we go celebrate?" Jake asked as we packed up his graduation gifts and cards. "Absolutely. Where would you like to go?" "How about our pizza place? The one where we used to go after soccer games when I was little." "You're still little?" I protested, and he laughed. "Not as little as I used to be." At dinner, Jake was unusually reflective about the transition ahead. Middle school would bring new challenges, new friends, and new opportunities for independence. But instead of anxiety, he expressed excitement about the adventures waiting for him. "Dad, do you ever worry about me growing up?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "but mostly I'm excited to see what you'll accomplish. You've already shown me that you can handle whatever life throws at you. I learned that from watching you. When Mom left and everyone thought we couldn't make it on our own, you never gave up. You just figured out how to make it work. We figured it out together. Yeah, but you were the grown-up. You were the one who had to make all the hard decisions and deal with all the criticism. I just had to be a kid." The insight in his observation reminded me of how much he'd understood throughout our journey, even when I'd thought I was protecting him from the adult complexities of our situation. "Jake, can I tell you something? Being your dad has been the greatest privilege of my life, not just because you're an amazing kid, but because you've taught me what really matters." "What's that?" "That love is enough. That showing up every day is enough. That listening to you and supporting your dreams and helping you become who you're meant to be, that's enough. More than enough." Jake smiled and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Dad, I have something for you." He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket, another letter, written in his increasingly mature handwriting. "Dear Dad," it began, "today I graduated from elementary school, which means we finished the first part of our adventure together. I wanted to write this letter to tell you some things I might forget to say when I'm a teenager and think I know everything. Thank you for never making me feel like I was too much trouble or too much work. Thank you for learning how to braid my hair and make my favorite foods and help me with homework even when you were tired. Thank you for coming to every soccer game and every school event and never making me feel like I had to earn your attention. Thank you for letting me talk about mom without getting upset and for helping me understand that it's okay to love people, even when they can't be what we need them to be. Thank you for showing me that families come in all shapes and sizes, and that the best families are the ones where everyone feels safe and loved. Most of all, thank you for teaching me that I'm enough exactly as I am, and that I don't have to be perfect to be loved. I know middle school and high school and college are going to be different, and I know I'll probably make mistakes and have problems you can't fix. But I also know that no matter what happens, I'll always have this foundation you've given me, this feeling of being completely loved and supported. I hope when I grow up and have kids of my own, I can be the kind of father to them that you've been to me. I love you, Dad. Thanks for being the best teammate a kid could ask for. Your son, Jake. P.S. I still think you're the real father of the year, even though now everyone else knows it too. I finished reading through tears that I didn't try to hide. This letter, like so many moments in our journey together, was proof that love and dedication had been enough. More than enough. Jake, this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me. I meant every word. As we drove home from dinner, Jake chattering about his plans for the summer and his excitement about starting middle school, I felt a profound sense of completion. We'd not only survived the challenges of single parenthood, we'd thrived, we'd created a family that was strong, happy, and ready for whatever came next. The boy sitting beside me was confident, kind, and secure in ways that would serve him well throughout his life. He knew he was loved unconditionally, and he'd learned to extend that same unconditional love to others. As we pulled into our driveway, Jake looked at our small apartment with satisfaction. "Home sweet home," he said, echoing a phrase we'd been using since his kindergarten days. "Home sweet home," I agreed, and it truly was.